For those of you who are in the room, as well as for myself, some of you are obviously younger, and you won't have as much problem with this question that I'm about to ask you. But for those of us who are a little older, try to reflect back to when you were in your 20s, specifically when you were 27. Anything coming to mind exactly what you were doing when you were 27? Giving birth, there you go. Because for our next speaker this morning, the age of 27 became a very important year in her life. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Soania Mathur this morning. Soania went to medical school at Dalhousie University. She did her residency in family practice at the University of Toronto, and then joined the Oshawa Clinic. And she had a practice in Cortese for over 12 years. She is a member of the Patient Council of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and she's also working closely with the Brian Grant Foundation, and obviously is now working closely with Parkinson Society Central and Northern Ontario. Soania was diagnosed at the age of 27. She was in her last year of medical school, and speaking of giving birth, she was also pregnant at the time. She is the proud mother of 3 daughters. She's married for almost 18 years now. I already had this, where's Aaron now? I already had this written, just so you know, I'm not just making this up, you can see. To a very supportive husband. He's a urologist at the same clinic in Cortese. We have the pleasure of having Dr. Mathur give us some insights into her journey as a young onset person with Parkinson's, some of her coping strategies, but also I understand that she's going to call on her husband to also put a picture on the family side of things in terms of coping with Parkinson's as a family. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Soania Mathur.
First of all, thank you for that introduction, Sandy. I really appreciate it. I will apologize ahead of time for any of you that were at the Belleville conference last year. Some of this might be a repeat. I usually title my talks during Shaken but Not Stirred. I'm not referring to how I like my martinis. I'm referring to how I live my life, shaking but not stirred. Living well with Parkinson's, that constant unwelcome guest that we never invited to come along with our life, but has decided to join us on this journey. To say that this has not been a challenge would be a lie. To say that this disease has not profoundly affected pretty much every aspect of my life would be a lie. And also to say that the positive and optimistic outlook that I now have would also be, that outlook came easy to me would actually be the biggest lie of all. But that's where I stand at this moment. I have very positive and optimistic about the future and determined not to allow this disease to really affect who I am fundamentally. Parkinson's disease is a ubiquitous condition. There's a variety of symptoms, there's a variety of ages of presentation, a variety of life stages that we do present or are diagnosed with. But despite our differences, I'm sure part of what I will say today will resonate with some of you, and most of you, depending on what stage of your journey that you are on. So I hope that you might be able to glean some insight with what I have to say. My story begins in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's where I was born. I was born to parents who had immigrated from India 4 years prior to my arrival. For those of you who've been down east, you know, it's a lot of fresh food, a lot of fresh air, a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of exercise. And initially, there wasn't even any family history of Parkinson's. And I say initially because soon after my own diagnosis, my father would also be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. But he was a health nut, which again, you know, contributed to that clean living. Unfortunately, he passed away just recently, not from Parkinson's, but as a result of a brain illness. Thank you.
Parkinson's just been half the talk with this mic on.
Nova Scotia is where I met my husband, actually. Aaron, who's also a physician, and who's a urologist at the same clinic. We actually worked together. We worked together for a short period of time until the tremor got really bad and I really wasn't any good in the OR anymore. I say the tremor was actually because I didn't want to boss me around. But I digress. My story is, my symptoms did begin at the age of 27. They started off as a sort of a tremor in my right thumb. And initially it was actually medically intriguing to me. I kind of thought, oh wow, this is what my patients talk about when they tell me about a tremor, and I kind of just put it aside and ignored it. I was just completing my residency in family practice at the University of Toronto. I was actually finishing a fellowship in low-risk obstetrics. And I was just basically too busy to really worry about it. I was also gearing up to have a surgery to remove a pituitary or brain tumor, which was benign at that time, so I was more involved with that. A couple of months after my surgery, we were actually so happy to find out that we were expecting our first child. And through the morning sickness and my changing body, the tremor became more concerning. It became more constant. It wasn't sort of intermittent anymore. It was sort of becoming a daily occurrence. So I went to a neurologist colleague of mine who was at the same clinic that I had just started practicing, and he put me through the ream of clinical testing, and at the end of it he kind of leaned over the desk and he said, well, I think you have young onset Parkinson's disease. And I looked at him like he was crazy. At 27, I sort of remember hearing about Parkinson's disease affecting younger people in distant medical school lecture, but it wouldn't happen to me, of course. And so by then I sort of turned back to the neurologist, and was actually quite angry, I must say. I kind of thought, well, I'm not going to send my patients to you anymore because you obviously don't know what you're talking about. But I did accept his offer for a second opinion. And so I left the office in disbelief, but thought, okay, I'll go see this guy and he'll set the record straight. So the months went by, and I just basically immersed myself in my practice, and we had our daughter during that period of time. But finally the day arrived, and I went to the movement disorder clinic at Toronto Western. And again, I was in the waiting room waiting to see the neurologist, and looking at people around me and the typical pill rolling tremor, and I just thought this couldn't be me. I wasn't having those symptoms that I thought I should have if I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Of course, this is very early in the process. So my turn finally arrived. I sat with the resident. He did his whole room clinical testing again. I thought, okay, he's going to go up, he's going to speak with his staff person, and he's going to come in and tell me I don't have Parkinson's. I was sort of anxious and excited to hear that diagnosis. Unfortunately, when the senior neurologist came in, the diagnosis was the same, Parkinson's disease. And that sort of set my mind spinning. The rest of the meeting was really pretty much a blur. Good thing Arlen was there and he could kind of, get the logistics sorted out. And so the diagnosis was made, and I kind of say that it was the decade of denial, anger, and secrecy and fear for me. So the tremor progressed. It affected my right hand, my right foot, my left hand, and my left foot, and I basically just ignored it. I immersed myself in a growing family and work. So that's my youngest, Sarga, who again was born just prior to my diagnosis. 2 years after that, we welcomed Neha to our family, and 4 years after that, we welcomed our third. A proud moment to show. We were both enjoying parenthood. We had both had blossoming careers, we were building a house, and everything really should have been ideal at that time. But yet there's this shadow constantly hanging over us. This progressive neurological disease was basically taking over my body, stiffening it in the morning, cramping my feet to the point where I couldn't walk, amplifying the tremor, causing a lot of back and upper neck pain, turning my nights into restless exhaustion. I'm sure this is not unique to me. This is something that we all face on probably pretty much a daily basis, and there was no escaping it. I actually mourned the day that I had to give up assisting in the OR, if I must be truthful about that. And I mourned the day that I had to give up suturing in my urgent care. I hated the fact that I had to time my medication so that I could, effectively give immunizations without scaring the parents of the child with my hand shaking. And it affected pretty much every aspect of my life. Because I had young children, I had to stop taking my medications when I was pregnant and when I was breastfeeding. So, handling the baby, or changing clothes, or giving baths, all that was really significantly affected. Not that it stopped me from doing it, but I was constantly trying to fight to gain, control over my coordination. Socially, it was difficult. And again, you all face this, careful timing of your medications so that you can, effectively go to a dinner party. And I had chosen to keep things private. I wasn't telling anybody. So that increased the stress that I was facing on that basis. And so for a long time, I focused on the difficulties I was facing on a daily basis, and all that I felt that I was giving up. Primarily because it really wasn't my choice. I had no control, and at a time when life should have been so busy and so exciting, I was dealing with this diagnosis. Although no one could tell from my external demeanor, I really wasn't feeling joy anymore. I didn't like the fact that I really actually rarely laughed. I was so intent on distracting myself with activity that I was just basically busying myself with busyness and exhausting myself in the process. And this was not who I wanted to be. Really not who I wanted to be. There were so many questions. I was consumed by fear of the future. Was I going to be there for my family? Was I going to be there to see my daughters in all their stages of life? Were we going to travel, after we retired? And I was consumed by that disability. And that's where I stood for a very long time, on the brink of disaster. In fact, I spent, as I mentioned, almost a decade in denial and avoidance. This is a quote which I find really quite uplifting. Everything can be taken from a man, but the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is a quote by Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist. He wrote a famous publication which, when translated, it was entitled Man's Search for Meaning. His work was basically based on his experience as a Holocaust survivor, having survived not one, but 3 concentration camps. And it was his years in the Nazi camps that he observed that those people that had hope for the future, or some goal that they wished to achieve, were less likely to succumb to the brutalization they were subjected to compared to people that had none of that. Now, I must at this point say that I'm not likening my journey with Parkinson's to that of the Holocaust. I mean, to lose one's entire family, to be subjected to that is unimaginable and unthinkable. But the premise of saying yes to life despite everything can be extrapolated to most situations, including those of us that suffer from chronic disease. And somehow things changed for me. It wasn't one conversation, it really wasn't reading one quote, it was just an accumulation of getting tired, growing tired of the stress that I was under. It was worsening my symptoms of stress, and it was changing me as a person, and I really didn't like that. And I gradually began to realize that really no one could make this better at this point. I had hope for the future, undoubtedly, but at this point in time, there was no one that was going to I was going to wake up one morning and this disease would be gone. It wasn't at that time my choice to be fearful, is what I began to realize. And that I began to understand that although the diagnosis was not under my control, the way I was going to face this challenge was in my control. So now at 40 years of age, I became my age quite I have lived with the challenge of Parkinson's for almost 14 years. And it's been over a decade of growing tremor, a lot of self-doubt, changes in medication, a lot of inner turmoil. But for me, when you're living in that state of mind, that isn't really living. And although it was easier for me to succumb to negative thoughts, I've now found that, although more difficult, it's really restored my sense of control to be more positive in terms of how I take this challenge on. And recognize that I do have control in how I feel about this, and control the situation. It is what it is. Acceptance does not equal complacency. And I put that in because I don't want you to think, I mean, you can't do anything about it, so just lie down and, you know, accept it. That's all. That's all you have to do. Because there are a lot of things that we can do as people affected with Parkinson's disease, and also our caregivers can do to help us live well with this disease. I think that's really important. I'm sure that it's been touched on already, but education. Education is extremely important for anyone dealing with any kind of illness. We have to be our own advocates. We have to have knowledge by which to go to our movement disorder specialists to ask relevant and important questions that will affect us now and in the future. We have to get educated about what is going on in new research, and I think Dr. Adams really explained a lot of that earlier, which is excellent. Support services. Again, I think some of this is going to be addressed in this afternoon, right? I know that the Parkinson Society of Canada holds regular support groups throughout the country, and that I think most of the schedule of those can be accessed on the website, from what I understand, from what I've seen. Young onset support groups are now starting, although there have been many informal groups for a long time. I think some formal groups are now starting to come out. And if you're in an area where you can't get to a support group, there are many online support groups. NeuroTalk is one of them. John, what's the other?
I go on a
National Parkinson's Foundation. Yeah. Right, and that I think is a really wonderful support group as well. The National Parkinson's Foundation?
Yes, foundation.
Website.
Yeah.
They have a forum there, which a lot of people are involved with. It's just nice to be able to speak with individuals that are going through your same experience that you are. And I believe, I know NeuroTalk, there are some caregiver forums as well. Professional counseling. This also goes to say, because anxiety and depression can be quite common in individuals with Parkinson's disease, that's where a lot of professional counseling, professional attention can also be helpful. Legal and financial counseling often comes up, particularly in the workplace or when dealing with disability issues. What else can we do for ourselves besides getting educated and becoming really strong advocates? Exercise. I don't know if Dr. Adams spoke about this, but this is something I'm really passionate about. It says, exercising builds muscle. Muscle makes you want to show off your body. To show off your body, you need a tan. Tanning turns your skin to leather. Cows are made of leather. Cows are fat. Therefore, exercising makes you fat. Parkinson's or no Parkinson's, we all have our excuses when it comes to exercise. But it happens to be a very hot topic in the field of Parkinson's. But, I mean, regular exercise is obviously beneficial for everyone. We know it's good for our pulmonary and cardiovascular health, helps to prevent bone loss, and slows cognitive loss. It makes sense. I mean, humans were not built to drive around in our SUVs, to walk to the fridge for our next, usually unhealthy meal. We were made to walk for our life. We were made to forage for our food, hunt, outrun our predators. But there is also good evidence that exercise is really beneficial for those with Parkinson's in particular. I mean, it seems intuitive, really, that there are disease-specific benefits for Parkinson's. Motor symptoms improve, perhaps even cognition, and this is being studied currently in the ParkFit study. We also know that Parkinson's disease, that exercise also helps with sleep, which is also often affected in Parkinson's, and constipation is also another issue that can be addressed as well. The second thing is a neuronal adaptation symptomatic benefit. That basically means, are we just feeling better, or are we actually doing something to help the disease? There was a study done by a group led by Dr. Tajiri in January of 2010, and he did research in rats, basically rats that were basically Parkinson's rats, I guess. In his research, he basically exercised these rats to run on a treadmill 5 days a week, 30 minutes, at 11 miles per hour, which I thought was pretty fast for a rat. I guess that was a typo, I don't know. They were actually able to do better in terms of their measurement of Parkinson's, measurement of activities in terms of what they were able to accomplish as rats. And when they did studies, it actually showed that there was an increase in dopamine release in dopamine neurons, which is really quite exciting. There's also, there have been many, many studies. People often say, well, what kind of exercise is best? There have been a few studies. Just this past month, Dr. Lisa Schulman from the University of Maryland School of Medicine presented a study where she concluded that even low-intensity exercise improved walking in Parkinson's patients. And Dr. Gobi published a study also examining 2 exercise interventions, one with very intense, focused exercise, one with much more, easy exercise, only once a week, which focused on balance and more stretching and that sort of thing. And both groups showed a benefit. Bottom line is get moving. In whatever way you're able to, whatever, we also have to take into account our general physical conditioning, what our primary care physicians says we're allowed to do, but certainly moving in any way, like skiing, cycling, walking, anything is beneficial in terms of exercise. The other thing that we have control with, nutrition. Which sensible diet do you want me to follow? I found 123,942 of them on the internet. It's true. Google does that to us. Good nutrition is essential. Parkinson's disease patients are really high risk for having poor nutrition. We tend to lose more muscle mass compared to healthy controls, and we're 4 times more likely to have 10-pound weight loss or more compared to our age-matched controls. And both can sort of lead to generalized weakness and increased risk of falling, which is a huge concern. Weight loss can be due to just the fact that we're not getting enough calories, chewing and swallowing difficulties, which become an issue, impaired mobility or ability to prepare our meals if we don't have a caregiver involved, and depression, cognitive impairment. All these can lead to weight loss. No specific diet is required, really. It should be well balanced, contain enough fiber and fluids to combat the constipation aspect of things, and enough calcium to maintain our bone structure. Dietary amino acids, just maybe Dr. Adams spoke about this, but it's basically the effect of taking your medication with high protein meals. Oftentimes it doesn't really matter, but in people that are having problems maintaining, like they're having a lot of off periods, for those people, you might want to stagger your meal and make sure you have too much protein. Constipation. Coenzyme Q10 is already interesting. The roles that we play. She says, I'm a mother, a wife, a businesswoman, a teacher, a nurse, a cook, and a housekeeper. That's just 23 pounds per woman. I think all the women in the audience can sort of relate to this slide, but it can be modified for the gentlemen as well. In Parkinson's, we're often dealing with unique issues depending on what stage of life we're diagnosed. And this is what sort of this conference is all about. We aren't just islands unto ourselves. We function in society. We have a family that we also deal with. Maybe we're the primary breadwinner, maybe we're in the thick of parenting children or being involved with raising our grandchildren. This is the time that we're usually in the thick of family activities. And how do you deal with these challenges and Parkinson's places on all these aspects? Parkinson's Society of Canada's website says that about 25 to 35% of people diagnosed with Parkinson's are still in the workplace. I think that's probably a much higher number in those of us that are affected in the young onset population. And this is, again, because diagnosis is often made when we're in our prime, at the point where we're trying to succeed financially or prepare for our retirement. And this, necessitates a lot of financial planning to take into account the cost of supporting our family and also planning for our retirement nest egg. At this stage in life, it's often very common for us to define ourselves by our occupation. I'm a doctor, I'm an accountant, I'm a teacher. And therefore, there's a lot of times where we have a lot of self-esteem issues that come up when we maybe can't work or do the same job. Disclosure is also a huge issue, either in the workplace or to our colleagues, to our patients, which I didn't do for a very long time. For me, I would not be telling you the truth if I didn't say that it's still not a challenge for me. I very much so define myself by my occupation. I'm currently on a medical leave of absence from my practice, and although I do have a very strong desire to go back, I know that when I do go back, if I do go back, it will be to a very limited practice, and I mourn that loss, and that took a long time for me to adjust to. The biggest challenge for me probably was that I'm not defined, to understand that I'm not defined by my career, and I'm sure there are many of you that struggle with that same realization. But for now, this is my reality, and I have to accept that. I hated the fact that it was not my choice to stop. It would rather have been my choice to stop than not. But I do realize that I have a choice in how I face that challenge and how I push my future. In the midst of every difficulty lies opportunity, and that's really been true for me. As Sandy said, I've been able to have the opportunity through this challenge to involve with things I probably would never have gotten involved with. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, the Brian Grant Foundation. I've written a couple of books for children on Parkinson's disease, which are in the illustration phase right now. Doing some fundraising, and that has given me a lot of satisfaction for my family. We all recognize the personal stress that we feel in our day-to-day lives. We experience it on a daily basis. Even if we don't forget about it, our body is quick to remind us. But what about our loved ones that are also joining us on this journey? They're also going through this experience with us. Sometimes it's natural that we get lost in our own personal stress, and that's normal human nature. But I'm sure that most of the time we recognize that this diagnosis really affects the whole family unit, and often places a lot of stress on our families, which are sometimes young at times. Out of necessity, family dynamics have to change. Roles and responsibilities have to change. Sometimes we need to delegate certain activities to others in the family and take on less physically demanding challenges yourself. I'm not bad at delegating household chores, so I don't mind that so much. But expectations of future management of the family as a whole have to change. I want to talk a little bit about children because that's my passion, having Sarah, who's 12, Maya, who's 10, and Uriah, who's now 6. When a parent is diagnosed with any chronic illness, and this goes for grandparents as well who have younger grandchildren, it undoubtedly affects the children in the family. They're really having enough difficulty navigating the world themselves, hormones, stress at school, etc. And so I think how you approach this topic with children or grandchildren is extremely important. One thing common to all children is that they'll really base their reaction on your reaction. Much like, when a toddler falls and you kind of freak out or fuss over them, they'll cry. But if you just sort of nonchalantly, address the issue, they'll often just pick themselves up and walk away. So their reaction often depends on yours. And this is sort of the approach that we kept in mind when we dealt with it with our own children. They've sort of been in a unique situation in that that's all they've really known. They've had a mother with Parkinson's disease, although they didn't have the disease labeled. Sometimes Mama needs her rest. Sometimes she's okay to run around the yard. Sometimes Mama can color inside the lines, and maybe not so much at other times. Sometimes she can do your nails, and maybe it's not a good time to ask her. She needs her medications. These are just facts of life for them. About a year and a half or 2 years ago, I think, we actually sat them down. Our children get allowance, and they are supposed to, and they do so willingly, donate part of their allowance to charity. And they've been doing that for a while. So about a year and a half or 2 years ago, we sat down with him and we said, do you know why we go to all these Parkinson's events? Why did you bring up? We felt that they were at the stage where they could actually hear the words of Parkinson's disease. It was kind of funny because our 12-year-old we thought would be, much more in tune and would come up with an educated answer. She, of course, was like, I don't know. I would like to go. Whereas our 10-year-old actually turned to us and said, because you have Parkinson's disease. So that showed to me that children are very intuitive. They actually do know that something's going on. And it's better to address that because sometimes if you don't address it, their fear of the unknown can take over. I think you have to address it, you have to label it, give them whatever knowledge is appropriate for their age group. Obviously our 6-year-old doesn't know as much as our 12-year-old or 10-year-old. And give them ways to help out. Grandparents, the same thing. Because for them it's really a powerless situation. They don't know what they can do to help, and they often do want to help. So giving them ideas about how they can help with housework, or to sit down with you, or to read with you, or just to be acutely aware of what your needs are is also very important. And our girls do all that, plus they also are very active in fundraising at their school for Parkinson's disease research, which again has given them a sense of proactivity. It's really been more of a teaching point for our children. It's taught them empathy and kindness and compassion, lessons that are going to help them in all aspects of their lives. And it's really taught them something very fundamental, that life has its challenges, but how you face those challenges is what's going to define you. And that is something that is, I think, going to be invaluable. Marital issues. Marriages change. Like any life-altering event, it's going to either strengthen your relationship or maybe it will be able to withstand the challenge. And a lot of that is based on compatibility. It really has nothing to do with Parkinson's specifically. Maybe the diagnosis was just a catalyst for a relationship that was not compatible in the first place. I mean, this happened to a good friend of ours within 6 months of his diagnosis. At the age of 36, his wife left him, but when you talk to him, you can really understand that the marriage was in trouble long before that. But in many cases, and I would hope to say most cases, although I don't have the statistics to back that up, and thankfully my own, our partners step up to the plate and hold our hand and walk us through this journey that we're facing. On that note, I'd like to ask my husband to come up and say a few words from the spouse's perspective.
Can you guys hear me if I just talk like this, or do you want me to use the mic? You need the mic? Okay. Just a couple of days ago, Soania asked me to say a few words from the spouse's perspective. I do a lot of talks on prostate cancer as a urologist, and I feel like I should start talking about prostate cancer here. But I always talk about my work, but I've never talked about my personal life. I usually do keep my personal life private. And it's a serious topic, but before I move into that, just for 2 seconds for Soania about this whole aspect of how to support Parkinson's, I just want a quick little joke just to lighten up a little bit. I know it's a serious topic also today. Sometimes you need something to lighten things up. Frank and Jack, 2 really, really good friends. And both these guys used to love baseball. They lived, breathed, and died baseball. All day long they would go to baseball games, and they loved to play baseball. So they talked about it, and they said, we have a crappy baseball field here in town. I wish I could say it's HS, but we actually have very good baseball fields here. But they said, I wonder what baseball is like in heaven. It must be just active, just beautiful. So they said, let's make a deal. Jack, Frank, whichever one of us dies first and goes to heaven, that guy's got to come back and tell us what it's like in heaven to see the baseball fields. So they went along on the merry way. A couple weeks later, horrible thing happened. Jack got hit by a car. Poor guy passed away, went to heaven. Frank, elderly dad, moved onwards. A couple weeks passed by. He was in his office one day, just relaxing. And he hears a voice. It sounds just like Jack's voice. And Jack's voice is in the background saying, Frank, it's me, Jack. I'm up here in heaven. And Frank said, well, tell me, what's it like up there? What's the place like? Is baseball big up there? Jack said,
got some good news and I got some bad news for you, Frank. The good news first, amazing. The baseball fields are gorgeous, bigger than the Sky Dome, fabulous fields, phenomenal. The bad news, Frank, you're pitching on Friday. So, with that, it's kind of moderate. It's a little bit morbid, but it's funny. As far as being a spouse is concerned, it really started way, way back. And back in 1998, and as Sonia mentioned, I was sitting with her, newborn baby, listening to the docs talk about Parkinson's and to diagnose out. As a physician, my gut reaction, the first thing I did, I started looking around. Where the hell is that medical degree? Did he get it from Box Bun or Cracker Jack Box? And it's like Sonia, I said, this guy must have screwed up. There's no question about it. There's no way my wife has Parkinson's. And I was upset. I was angry. But that subsided pretty quick. As soon as I looked at her, and I saw a look at her face and what she's going through, I then realized that, I can't take that attitude. I can't be angry. I've got to be there to support her. And it really is a roller coaster ride that these patients go through. And it doesn't just affect the patient, the ripple effect is through everybody. And I think one of the biggest person or individuals that gets that effect is actually the spouse, whether it's the husband or the wife. They take the brunt of it, especially in the early years. We try our best to shield the kids. All of us do. Everyone in this room has. I guarantee everyone in this room has not told their children or grandchildren right off the bat. But the spouse takes it right off the bat. And you guys all see in your spouses that have gone through or going through Parkinson's, the roller coaster ride they go through. The initial response is anger. Why me? It's fear. What's going to happen down the road? What kind of end is it going to be for me? Or what's my life going to be like? Sonia's first gut reaction was things like, am I going to be there and able to walk down the aisle with my daughter 20 years from now, and see her get married, to enjoy the grandchildren? And all these things start going through your mind. And the hard part for the spouse is, how do you deal with it? And from day to day, to minute, to second, it changes. I could be standing there with Sonia and having a really deep discussion or spiritual discussion on Parkinson's, and she's down with it, she's depressed with it and upset. And 2 seconds later, she's excited, she's happy, something turns on with the kids, and she's having a great time. So at one moment, my support to her has got to be really serious, and I've got to be able to provide a shoulder for her to lean on. And 2 seconds later, I can have some fun with it. Say, oh, I've got a glass of milk. Here, Sonia, I need a milkshake. Could you shake this up for me? I got to figure out what to do. And it's hard because I get to read what she's like. And it's not easy to read her, like a lot of the patients in this room. And obviously, if she's really down and depressed by the situation, and there's no Parkinson's is affected with depression, the last thing you want to do is give her a milkshake and say, I give her a glass of milk and say, give me a milkshake. And vice versa, when she's having a fun time with the kids. And initially in the early years, they weren't very frequent. Sonia said she did regress in herself. She really did not smile. I had to struggle to squeeze a smile out of her for the first 4 or 5 years. In that situation, any small moment you get with a little smile, you want to use that and enjoy it. So the struggle for me was not as much trying to support her in the sense that helping her get around, helping her with her drugs, or when she's having a struggle opening that peanut butter jar, for me to try to get that jar open for her, which usually she would not tell me because she'd sit there for half an hour and say, I'm going to open this damn thing if you're not helping me. She didn't want that, and when she did want it, I could easily do that. Anyone here would step up to the plate and do that. The really hard part is the emotional struggle trying to support them. And that's what I found difficult over the first 4 or 5 years. As time went on, we got used to it, and I was able to read her a bit better. But the biggest thing is trying to read the individual. You have to try to see what the person's going through. It's impossible to put yourself in their shoes. There's no way I cannot imagine what it's like for her every morning to get up and struggle trying to get to the bathroom until that first pill, that first Cinemet gets to her tongue, and things start opening up, and the oil on the rusty hinges starts to work. I can't imagine that. And I wish I could. I wish I could be a part of that. I wish I could take that disease and put it on myself, but I can't. So I have to try to read what she's going through and help her in that capacity. The second thing is hope for the future. any condition, whether it's a chronic condition that I have to deal with every single day, and that's cancer, dealing with prostate cancer, or whether it's Parkinson's or MS, you name it. Every condition, you want that little bit of glimmer of hope. I get patients coming to my practice with end-stage prostate cancer and advanced prostate cancer. I still try to give them that little glimmer of hope that we can do something that helps them. And I've got several people in the audience that have already come up to me that are patients of mine here. And I try to read as much as I can on the topic, understand the disease as a spouse, try to understand what she's going through, come to support groups like this, and by understanding it, I can give her some hope for the future that yes, she will hopefully be going down that aisle with my daughter when it's time for her to get married down the road. Well, actually $3, but it's going to cost me a fortune. You got to think as a parent.
Kind of volume higher.
I can try to talk a little bit louder. Is that better? Okay. So hope is a huge thing. Trying to give the patients with Parkinson's some degree of hope as a spouse. So support and hope emotionally are the two biggest things I give her. As far as there's days that go by that she says to me, half joking, Aaron, you got some defective merchandise here. And, those are the days that she's feeling down in the dumps and God gave her a bad set of genes. And as Soania touched on, you can't define yourself by the disease. It'll be disastrous if you try to do that. We all have to define ourselves by who we are. That's our morals for us, which is huge, our children, our grandchildren, our actions. That's how we define ourselves. Not by our career, not by our diseases. And that's really, really important. And I try to explain that to her when she says to me that she's defective merchandise. No, that does not define who you are. If I had to go back, and I go back to 1988, and I was in that little dance hall with Soania, and I saw her from a distance, and I asked her, and I said to her, will you go on a date with me? And I can vividly remember that day. If she turned to me right now, and I got this back to that time, and she said to me, sure, I'd love to, but 10 years from now, I'm going to have Parkinson's. My answer is really simple. Great, what time should I pick you up? Thank you.
That was kind of sweet. It was very sweet. So I'm just going to end off with a quote that I actually really, it's kind of a mantra for me, and it's something that I started saying to myself long before I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. That's don't pray for an easy life, pray to be a strong person. I do believe that everything happens for a reason, although sometimes the answers is not always obvious. I can now see the blessings that this disease has brought to me. Before, I only saw a curse. I appreciate each and every day. I enjoy each and every moment I have with my husband and my children, whether it's special moments or the daily grind. I take nothing now for granted. I've gone from asking the question, why me, to why not me? Better me than my children, better me than my husband, better me than someone else who maybe isn't able to cope with this diagnosis as I am. Everyone has some sort of struggle in their life, and this happens to be my challenge. And that's how I see Parkinson's now, as a challenge as opposed to a disease. And it's not a unique struggle. There are many of you that have this disease. There are many, others, millions of people that have this disease worldwide or struggling with some sort of chronic illness. But I think we owe it to ourselves and to those that we love to focus on what we can control and surrender that which is beyond our control. No one knows really what life will bring, and although I sort of have a glimpse into my future, I'm ready to face it head on. And I'll leave you with one thought, that at some point, you have to abandon your fear of the future and begin living your present. Thank you.
I'm going to try and I'll row, and if anybody has a few questions, we'll get a few minutes before lunch. We'll try to get the microphones where
Okay. It works. Now you know you can speak. I was just wondering, in your opinion, has Parkinson's get its fair share of research funding and stuff like that from the government?
It's a very good question. Right now, in terms of funding of Parkinson's, the largest funder is still the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. They put in almost $225 million into Parkinson's research. I don't think it gets as much as it should, to be honest. Because, you know, if you look at the numbers, Parkinson's disease can affect, you know, 1 in 100 patients over the age of 60. So with the population aging as well, we're going to come into a crisis situation soon for our healthcare system in terms of the number of people affected. So the answer is, I think, not enough, but it's heading in that direction.
I just want to, I have to have a question, but I want to just answer part of that as well. In Canada, we don't get any funding from the government for research. So all the research that we do through Parkinson's Society Canada is all funded through donor dollars. I do have a question. I'm sort of taking advantage of the fact that I've heard you speak before. Can you talk about how you disclosed to your family, when and how you did that, and what sort of led up to that decision to tell other people, friends and family?
Sure. The people that I told the earliest were my sister-in-laws because I needed them. I needed them to help me out in social situations where I needed to sort of, I needed a break or I needed them to get something for me. They needed to know to sort of back me up. And I needed some support as well, obviously. Aaron was a great source of support, but I needed more. It took me about 10 years to tell my parents. And they knew something was going on, but being the only child, I thought it would cause them more pain than anything else. So I was pleasantly surprised when I did tell them that they really were a good source of support. Around that same time, I told our larger, broader social circle as well. And the reason I sort of held off is I'm not the type of person that wants to hear poor you. I didn't want to be poor me. So I didn't really want to invite that from my social circle or my family. But I've been really pleasantly surprised in how much really just positive support there's been. And once I told them there's such a burden that was lifted that to keep this sort of thing secret is exhausting.
So would you recommend people tell higher?
Yeah, I wish I had told 10 years earlier.
Any other questions?
I'm just, as a spouse of someone with Parkinson, I feel so guilty if I reveal to any of our friends that my husband has Parkinson's without him having revealed it, and yet he won't reveal it, and sometimes it's obvious, they see the tremor, and I just wondered, about that, how you feel revealing it to people.
Sure. I mean, as a spouse, you have to respect their decision. And it was frustrating for me too. The difficult part for me that I had is all my friends are physicians. The majority of my friends are physicians. And out of that 10 years, we didn't tell anybody. I think after the second year, a lot of our friends knew right away. You'd be crazy as a physician not to recognize the tremor. And I had a hard time. So there's a lot of discussions in the background among our social circle that, I think Soania has Parkinson's, no question, she has a tremor and everything. And I wanted to tell at times people, but she wasn't ready. And the important thing is to make sure that you respect the individual. The hardest part of Parkinson's, and some people in this room can relate to that, is that down the road at some point, there is that potential. You'll lose a number of your faculties. Whether it's the ability to lift up something, the ability to walk, the ability to carry out simple day-to-day activities. And when you lose those things, you lose a lot of your self-control and dignity. And you have to respect that individual so that if they have this desire not to tell somebody, you have to respect that. After we told people about Parkinson's, in retrospect, we really made a mistake, and both of us felt that we should have told 9.5 years earlier, because the amount of work, by the end of it, by the 9th or 10th year of not telling people, and we go to social parties, what was happening was that between my sisters and myself, we'd be doing a lot of groundwork just trying to keep this thing covered. Sonia would go somewhere. First of all, she had to get something to eat. Either myself or my sister would go to the buffet table, because she can't go up there because her hands are like this. I get the food. I'd have to cut it up, because if she tries to use a knife and fork, one hand is tremoring, so she can't cut the food. So I cut it up in advance, and roundabout would say, oh, I got the food for you. Listen, Sonia, don't worry, I'll grab like tea for us, for both of us. Little things like that. She would then switch from her right hand, which had a tremor, to her left hand. So she kept one hand under her thigh when she was sitting, so she was shaking, and she would eat the left hand. My sisters would cover things up at parties. We knew that alcohol suppressed the tremor a little bit, so she'd have a drink probably before she started. All these little things. At the end of it, almost half your energy at every social event we went to was trying to cover the damn thing up than to actually enjoy the social event. And that was devastating. The amount of energy was going out of our bodies spiritually and emotionally. We didn't have any fun going anywhere. So I wish we had told people a lot sooner. But at the end of the day, I've got perspective. And Sonia's father, who had Parkinson's also, same thing. He never told anyone until right to the day he passed away. No one knew until a memorial service. And I wish he had told people sooner so he could enjoy social events. But he also had a hard time covering things up. But it's frustrating. As a caregiver, you want to tell people, but you have to respect the rights of the individual, my feeling. But if you tell them little stories like this, I think eventually your husband may come. He's not your eventually he may come around. The biggest thing for Sonia that came out of this, Sonia had a wish for the first 6 years, probably close to 8 years. The day she got diagnosed with Parkinson's in 1997 was almost the day that Michael J. Fox came out from the news that I got Parkinson's. He had it a year before that. And year would go by, year after year, and Sonia would say, just once, I'd love to meet that guy and be able to talk to him and find out what he's going through with Parkinson's. So I can relate to another human being that has the same thing that I have, especially young onset. And years would go by. I know you got a celebrity and didn't have the option for something like that. Long stories I'm not going to go through right now. I somehow got tickets to a fundraising event in New York City 3 years ago. And I said, Sonia, we're going to New York City. And I'm going to get you to meet Michael J. Fox. After the last 3 years, we've got a great relationship and friendship, and we know Michael reasonably well now. But at that time, that first event we went to, she walked in the room, and that was the first time she openly talked with other people in a room like this about Parkinson's. First time ever in her life, outside of me and my 2 sisters. And it was as if a massive million-ton weight was lifted off her shoulders. And from that point, the networking, the connections, the charity work, everything just exploded at that point. And to the point that she can now go back to living life. She can go to parties and enjoy herself. She can go to events and enjoy herself and not have to worry about if it's on or if it's off or how the drugs are. So tell your husband about that. If he ever gets involved in an organization like this and actually comes to an event like this, it'll be opening doors right off. I know something you want to ask.
No, that's great.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions. I've got one here and over there.
Just wondering maybe you could ask the committee where we are still on track with $15 million for the Brain Institute in Toronto. With the new government, the change of government. It's hard to promise before that we would support the project. Saying it changed now.
So we're still waiting to hear that. I mean, that was the promise. So we're still waiting to hear about the Brain Institute. And as far as I know, we're still on track, but okay.
Just a quick question for your brilliant husband. He's obviously, very strong personality. Did he end up leaning on somebody, to handle his stress? And the question quickly is, what's Michael J. Fox like?
I can answer the last part. Michael J. Fox, he's a very humble guy. He's very down to earth. He's a really normal guy. he basically doesn't put on any airs that he's actually doing very much at all. He just feels that he's surrounded himself with good people, good, smart people that are doing brilliant work. And he's just, he's a great guy.
I guess to answer your first question, the last 5 years, somebody put a lot of pressure on me to talk to somebody. And it's just not my nature. If anyone here is into sci-fi, I'm a big sucker. Oh, sorry.
Aren't we cheese?
Yeah, he's fine. What I was saying is that over the last 5-6 years, Soania has asked me, talk to somebody about this. You got to get this off your chest, because with her, it's not easy to talk about what I'm going through, because I have to support her. I don't feel like burdening her with it. And it's not easy. I'm a very introverted person when it comes to my personal life. And as I was mentioning, I'm really into sci-fi, and Soania jokes a lot of times I'm almost like Spock, because I keep a lot of my emotions internally bottled up. I'm sure a lot of stuff is buried pretty deep in my head. But no, I haven't really opened up a lot. I've got some very good friends. One of my best friends and a relative is a transplant urologist in Hamilton. And he and I go back to childhood days. And I have occasionally opened up to him a little bit. I do have a hard time doing that. I think that varies from person to person. If you're really having trouble dealing with it, definitely talk to people, especially close friends around you. I feel guilty dumping that on Soania. I just don't think I could ever do it, and I probably will never do it, because she's got enough on her plate. The last thing she needs is for me to go through stress. And it's not that bad. The first 5 years were tough. I'm not going to lie to you. And Soania knows that. They were tough as hell. I didn't know what to say. Half the time, stuff I would say would trigger, the response I didn't expect. I try to not belittle the situation, but kind of make small the situation, because I don't want it to be such a catastrophic event. And that's not what she wanted. She wanted me to really dig into the emotional side of it, and then she'd go off on a tangent, very upset. And so I was damned if I do, and I was damned if I don't. For the first 4 or 5 years, while she was struggling through it, I was struggling what to say to her. But we kind of opened up and got through that part of it. At that time, I think I wish I had talked to somebody. The first 5 years, I wish I had talked to somebody. Right now, I think we're in a really happy place right now. Things are going really well for us in dealing with this, and I think we're past all that. So if you're early on in the process, I'd say definitely find a good close friend or somebody you can open up to.
We can also recommend our Care Partners support group.